Rabbit Run by John Updike. Copyright 1960 by John Updike. This book consists of 307 pages. Chapter divisions are unnumbered. A note on the author. John Updike was born in 1932 in Shillington, Pennsylvania. He attended the public schools of that town, Harvard College, and the Ruskin School of Drawing and Fine Art in Oxford, England, where he spent a year on a Knox Fellowship. From 1955 to 1957, he was a member of the staff of The New Yorker, to which he has contributed short stories, humorous essays, light verse, and poems. A novel, The Poorhouse Fair, was published early in 1959, and won the Richard and Hinda Rosenthal Foundation Award, administered by the National Institute of Arts and Letters. The author and his wife live in Ipswich, Massachusetts, with their 3 children. This book was written with the help of a grant generously given by the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. The motions of grace, the hardness of the heart, external circumstances. Pascal, Pensée, 507. Rabbit Run. Boys are playing basketball around a telephone pole with a backboard bolted to it. Legs, shouts. The scrape and snap of keds on loose alley pebbles seems to catapult their voices high into the moist March air, blue above the wires. Rabbit Angstrom, coming up the alley in a business suit, stops and watches, though he's 26 and 6'3". So tall, he seems an unlikely rabbit, but the breadth of white face, the pallor of his blue irises, and a nervous flutter under his brief nose as he stabs a cigarette into his mouth partially explain the nickname which was given to him when he too was a boy. He stands there thinking, "The kids keep coming. They keep crowding you up." His standing there makes the real boys feel strange. Eyeballs slide. They're doing this for their own pleasure, not as a demonstration for some adult walking around town in a double-breasted cocoa suit. It seems funny to them, an adult walking up the alley at all. Where's his car? The cigarette makes it more sinister still. Is this one of those going to offer them cigarettes or money to go out in back of the ice plant with him? They've heard of such things, but are not too frightened. There are 6 of them and 1 of him. The ball, rocketing off the crotch of the rim, leaps over the heads of the 6 and lands at the feet of the 1. He catches it on the short bounce with a quickness that startles them. As they stare, hushed, he sights, squinting through blue clouds of weed smoke, a suddenly darker silhouette like a smokestack in the afternoon spring sky, setting his feet with care, wiggling the ball with nervousness in front of his chest, one widespread pale hand on top of the ball and the other underneath, jiggling it patiently to get some adjustment in air itself. The moons on his fingernails are big. Then the ball seems to ride up the right lapel of his coat and comes off his shoulder as his knees dip down, and it appears the ball will miss because, though he shot from an angle, the ball is not going toward the backboard. It was not aimed there. It drops into the circle of the rim, whipping the net with a ladylike whisper. "Hey!" he shouts in pride. "Luck," one of the kids says. "Skill," he answers, and asks, "Hey, okay if I play?" There is no response, just puzzled, silly looks swapped. Rabbit takes off his coat, folds it nicely, and rests it on a clean ash-can lid. Behind him, the dungarees begin to scuffle again. He goes into the scrimmaging thick of them for the ball, flips it from 2 weak white hands, has it in his own. That old, stretched leather feeling makes his whole body go taut, gives his arms wings. It feels like he's reaching down through years to touch this tautness. His arms lift of their own, and the rubber ball floats toward the basket from the top of his head. It feels so right, he blinks when the ball drops short, and for a second wonders if it went through the hoop without riffling the net. He asks, "Hey, whose side am I on?" In a wordless shuffle, 2 boys are delegated to be his. They stand the other 4. Though from the start Rabbit handicaps himself by staying 10 feet out from the basket, it is still unfair. Nobody bothers to keep score. The surly silence bothers him. The kids call monosyllables to each other, but to him they don't dare a word. As the game goes on, he can feel them at his legs, getting hot and mad, trying to trip him, but their tongues are still held. He doesn't want this respect. He wants to tell them there's nothing to getting old, it takes nothing. In 10 minutes another boy goes to the other side, so it's just Rabbit Angstrom and one kid standing 5. This boy, still midget but already diffident with a kind of rangy ease, is the best of the 6. He wears a knitted cap with a green pom-pom well down over his ears and level with his eyebrows, giving his head a cretinous look. He's a natural. The way he moves sideways without taking any steps, gliding on a blessing, you can tell. The way he waits before he moves. With luck, he'll become in time a crack athlete in the high school. Rabbit knows the way. You climb up through the little grades and then get to the top and everybody cheers. With the sweat in your eyebrows, you can't see very well, and the noise swirls around you and lifts you up. And then you're out. Not forgotten at first, just out. And it feels good and cool and free. You're out and sort of melt and keep lifting until you become, like to these kids, just one more piece of the sky of adults that hangs over them in the town, a piece that for some queer reason has clouded and visited them. They've not forgotten him. Worse, they never heard of him. Yet in his time, Rabbit was famous through the county. In basketball in his junior year, he set a B-League scoring record that in his senior year he broke with a record that was not broken until 4 years later, that is, 4 years ago. He sinks shots one-handed, two-handed, underhanded, flat-footed, and out of the pivot, jump, and set. Flat and soft the ball lifts. That his touch still lives in his hands elates him. He feels liberated from long gloom. But his body is weighty and his breath grows short. It annoys him that he gets winded. When the 5 kids not on his side begin to groan and act lazy, and a kid he accidentally knocks down gets up with a blurred face and walks away, Rabbit quits readily. "Okay," he says, "the old man's going." To the boy on his side, the pom-pom, he adds, "So long, Ace." He feels grateful to the boy who continued to watch him with disinterested admiration after the others grew sullen, and who cheered him on with exclamations, "God! Great! Gee!" Rabbit picks up his folded coat and carries it in one hand like a letter as he runs. Up the alley, past the deserted ice plant with its rotting wooden skids on the fallen loading porch. Ash cans, garage doors, fences of chicken wire caging, crisscrossing stalks of dead flowers. The month is March. Love makes the air light. Things start anew. Rabbit tastes through sour aftersmoke the fresh chance in the air, plucks the pack of cigarettes from his bobbling shirt pocket, and without breaking stride, cans it in somebody's open barrel. His upper lip nibbles back from his teeth in self-pleasure. His big suede shoes skim in thumps above the skittering litter of alley gravel. Running. At the end of this block of the alley, he turns up a street, Wilbur Street, in the town of Mount Judge, suburb of the city of Brewer, 5th largest city in Pennsylvania. Running uphill, past a block of big homes, fortresses of cement and brick inset with doorways of stained and beveled glass, and windows of potted plants, and then halfway up another block, which holds a development built all at once in the 30s. The frame homes climb the hill like a single staircase. The space of 6 feet or so that each double house rises above its neighbor contains 2 wan windows, wide-spaced like the eyes of an animal, and is covered with composition shingling varying in color from bruise to dung. The fronts are clapboards, weathered and white except for those gaps which individual owners have painted green and barn red and wheat color. There are a dozen 3-story homes, and each has 2 doors. The 7th door is his. The wood steps up to it are worn. Under them there is a cubby hole of dirt where a lost toy molders, a plastic clown. He's seen it there all winter, but he always thought some kid would be coming back for it. He pauses in the sunless vestibule, panting. Overhead, a daytime bulb burns dustily. 3 tin mailboxes hang empty above a brown radiator. His downstairs neighbor's door across the hall is shut like an angry face. There is that smell, which is always the same, but that he can never identify. Sometimes it seems cabbage cooking, sometimes the furnace's rusty breath, sometimes something soft decaying in the walls. He climbs the stairs to his home, the top floor. The door is locked. In fitting the little key into the lock, his hand trembles, pulsing with unusual exertion, and the metal scratches. But when he opens the door, he sees his wife sitting in an armchair with an old-fashioned, watching television turned down low. "You're here," he says. "What's the door locked for?" She looks to one side of him with vague, dark eyes reddened by the friction of watching. "It just locked itself." "Just locked itself," he repeats, but bends down to kiss her glossy forehead, nevertheless. She is a small woman with a tight, dark skin, as if something swelling inside is straining against her littleness. Just yesterday, it seems to him, she stopped being pretty. With the tiny addition of 2 short wrinkles at the corners, her mouth has become greedy, and her hair has thinned, so he keeps thinking of her skull under it. But he keeps hoping that tomorrow she'll be his girl again. "What you afraid of? Who do you think's going to come in that door?" Expecting no answer, he carefully unfolds his coat and goes to the closet with it and takes out a wire hanger. The closet is in the living room, and the door only opens halfway, since the television set is in front of it. He is careful not to kick the wire, which is plugged into a socket on the other side of the door. One time Janice, who is especially clumsy when pregnant or drunk, got the wire wrapped around her foot and nearly pulled the set, $149, down smash on the floor. Luckily, he got to it while it was still rocking in the metal cradle, and before Janice began kicking out in one of her panics. What made her get that way? What was she afraid of? With loving deftness, a deftness as complementary to the articulation of his own body as to the objects he touches, he inserts the corners of the hanger into the armholes of the coat, and with his long reach hangs it on the painted pipe with his other clothes. He presses the door shut, and it clicks, but then swings open again an inch or 2. Locked doors. It rankles. His hand trembling in the lock like some old man, and her sitting in here listening to the scratching. He turns and asks her, "If you're home, where's the car? It's not out front." "It's in front of my mother's. You're in my way." "In front of your mother's? That's terrific. That's just the goddamn place for it." "What's brought this on?" "Brought what on?" He moves out of her line of vision and stands to one side. She is watching a group of children called Mouseketeers perform a musical number in which Darlene is a flower girl in Paris and Cubby is a cop, and that smirky, squeaky, tall kid is a romantic artist. He and Darlene and Cubby and Karen, dressed as an old French lady whom Cubby as a cop helps across the street, dance. Then the commercial shows the 7 segments of a Tootsie Roll coming out of the wrapper and turning into the 7 letters of Tootsie. They, too, sing and dance. Still singing, they climb back into the wrapper. It echoes like an echo chamber. Son of a bitch. Cute. He's seen it 50 times, and this time it turns his stomach. His heart is still throbbing. His throat feels narrow. Janice asks, "Harry, do you have a cigarette? I'm out." "Huh?" "On the way home, I threw my pack into a garbage can. I'm giving it up." He wonders how anybody could think of smoking, with his stomach on edge the way it is. Janice looks at him at last. "You threw it into a garbage can? Holy mo! You don't drink, now you don't smoke. What are you doing, becoming a saint?" "Shh!" The big Mouseketeer has appeared, Jimmy, an older man who wears circular black ears. Rabbit watches him attentively. He respects him. He expects to learn something from him helpful in his own line of work, which is demonstrating a kitchen gadget in several 5 and dime stores around Brewer. He's had the job for 4 weeks. "Proverbs, proverbs, they're so true," Jimmy sings, strumming his mouse guitar. "Proverbs tell us what to do. Proverbs help us all to be better Mouseketeers." Jimmy sets aside his smile and guitar and says straight out through the glass, "Know thyself," a wise old Greek once said. "Know thyself." Now what does this mean, boys and girls? It means be what you are. Don't try to be Sally or Johnny or Fred next door. Be yourself. God doesn't want a tree to be a waterfall or a flower to be a stone. God gives to each one of us a special talent. Janice and Rabbit become unnaturally still. Both are Christians. God's name makes them feel guilty. God wants some of us to become scientists, some of us to become artists, some of us to become firemen and doctors and trapeze artists. And he gives to each of us the special talents to become these things, provided we work to develop them. We must work, boys and girls. So, know thyself. Learn to understand your talents, and then work to develop them. That's the way to be happy. He pinches his mouth together and winks. That was good. Rabbit tries that, pinching the mouth together and then the wink, getting the audience out front with you against some enemy behind, Walt Disney or the Magipeel Peeler Company. Admitting it's all a fraud, but what the hell, making it likable. We're all in it together. Fraud makes the world go round. The base of our economy. Vitaconomy, the modern housewife's password, the one-word expression for economizing vitamins by the Magipeel method. Janice gets up and turns off the set when the 6 o'clock news tries to come on. The little star left by the current slowly dies. Rabbit asks, "Where's the kid?" "At your mother's." "At my mother's? The car's at your mother's and the kid's at my mother's. Jesus, you're a mess." She stands up, and her pregnancy infuriates him with its look of stubborn lumpiness. She wears one of those maternity skirts with a U cut in the belly. A white crescent of slip shows under the hem of her blouse. "I was tired." "No wonder," he says. "How many of those have you had?" He gestures at the old-fashioned glass. She tries to explain. "I left Nelson at your mother's on my way to my mother's to go into town with her. We went in her car and walked around looking at the spring clothes in the windows, and she bought a nice Liberty scarf at Kroll's at a sale. Purpley paisley." She falters. Her little narrow tongue pokes between her parted rows of dim teeth. He feels frightened. When confused, Janice is a frightening person. Her eyes dwindle in their frowning sockets, and her little mouth hangs open in a dumb slot. Since her hair has begun to thin back from her shiny forehead, he keeps getting the feeling of her being brittle and immovable, of her only going one way, toward deeper wrinkles and skimpier hair. He married relatively late, when he was 24, and she was 2 years out of high school, still scarcely adult, with soft, small breasts that, when she lay down, flattened against her pliant body that was like a soft, smooth boy's. Nelson was born 7 months after the Episcopal service, in prolonged labor. This pang of memory turns Rabbit's fright to tenderness. "What did you buy?" "A bathing suit." "A bathing suit? Shh! In March?" She closes her eyes for a moment. He can feel the undertow of liquor sweep over her and is disgusted. "It made it seem closer to when I could fit into it." "What the hell ails you? Other women like being pregnant. What's so damn fancy about you? Just tell me. What is so friggin' fancy?" She opens her brown eyes, and tears fill them and break over the lower lids and drop down her cheeks, pink with injury, while she looks at him and says, "You bastard," with drunken care. Rabbit goes to his wife, and putting his arm around her, has a vivid experience of her, her tear-hot breath, her bloodshot eyes. In an affectionate reflex, he dips his knees to bring his loins against hers, but her belly prevents him. He stands to his full height above her and says, "Okay, you bought a bathing suit." Sheltered by his chest and arms, she says with unexpected earnestness, "Don't run from me, Harry. I love you." "I love you. Now come on, you bought a bathing suit." "Red," she says, rocking sadly against him. But her body, when tipsy, has a brittleness, an unconnectedness that feels disagreeable in his arms. "With a strap that ties behind your neck, and a pleated skirt you can take off in the water. Then my varicose veins hurt so much, Mother and I went into the basement of Kroll's and had chocolate sodas. They've redone the whole luncheonette section. The counter isn't there anymore. But my legs still hurt so much. Mother brought me home and said you could pick up the car in Nelson." "Your legs, hell. They were probably her legs." "I thought you'd be home before now. Where were you?" "Oh, clowning around. I played ball with some kids down the alley. They have parted." "I tried to take a nap, but I couldn't. Mother said I looked tired." "You're supposed to look tired. You're a housewife." "And meanwhile, you're off playing like a 12-year-old. He is indignant that she didn't see his crack about being a housewife, based on the image the Magapeel people tried to have their salesman sell to, as ironical and at bottom pitying and fond. There seems no escaping it. She is dumb. He says, "Well, what's the difference if you're sitting here watching a program for kids under 2? Who was shushing a while ago?" "Ah, Janice," he sighs. "Screw you, just screw you." She looks at him clearly a long moment. "I'll get supper," she at last decides. He is all repentance. "I'll run over and get the car and bring the kid back. The poor kid must think he has no home. What the hell makes your mother think my mother has nothing better to do than take care of other people's kids?" Indignation rises in him again at her missing the point of why he wanted to watch Jimmy. For professional reasons. To earn a living, to buy oranges for her, to put into her rotten old fashions. She moves into the kitchen, angry, but not angry enough. She should be really sore, or not sore at all, since all he had said was what he had done a couple 100 times. Maybe 1,000 times. Say on the average once every 3 days since 1956. What's that? 300. That often? Then why is it always an effort? She used to make it easier before they got married. She could be sudden then, just a girl. Nerves like new thread. Skin smelled like fresh cotton. Her girlfriend at work had an apartment in Brewer they used. Pipe frame bed, silver medallions in the wallpaper, a view westward of the great blue gas tanks by the edge of the river. After work, working both at Kroll's then, she selling candy and cashews in a white smock with Jan stitched on her pocket, and he lugging easy chairs and maple end tables around on the floor above, hammering apart packing crates from 9 to 5, the itch of the packing excelsior getting into his nose and eyes and making them burn. That filthy black crescent of bins behind the elevators, the floor covered with bent nails, his palms black, and Chandler, the dandy, mincing in every hour on the hour, telling him to wash his hands so he wouldn't foul the furniture. Lava soap. Its lather was gray. His hands grew yellow calluses from using the crowbar. After 5:30, the dirty day done, they would meet by the doors, chained to keep customers out, a green glass-paved chamber of silence between the 2 sets of doors. In the shallow side windows, the bodiless mannequin heads in their feathered hats and necklaces of pink pearls, eavesdropping on the echoing farewell gossip. Every employee hated Kroll's, yet they left it slow as swimming. Janice and Rabbit would meet in this chamber with the dim light and green floor like something underwater, and push at the one unchained door, push up into the light, and walk, never admitting they were going there, toward the silver medallions. Hand in hand, tired, walking gently against the current of home-going traffic, and make love with the late daylight coming level in the window. She was shy about him seeing her. She made him keep his eyes shut, and then with a shiver come as soon as he was in, her inside softly grainy, like a silk slipper. Lying side by side on this other girl's bed, feeling lost, having done the final thing, the walls silver and the fading days gold. The kitchen is a narrow room off the living room, a tight aisle between machines that were modern 5 years ago. She drops something metal, a pan or cup. "Think you can make it without burning yourself?" he calls in. "Are you still here?" is the answer. He goes to the closet and takes out the coat he hung up so neatly. It seems to him he's the only person around here who cares about neatness. The clutter behind him in the room, the old-fashioned glass with its corrupt dregs, the choked ashtray balanced on the easy-chair arm, the rumpled rug, the floppy stacks of slippery newspapers, the kids' toys here and there broken and stuck and jammed, a leg off a doll and a piece of bent cardboard that went with some breakfast box cut out, the rolls of fuzz under the radiators, the continual crisscrossing mess, clings to his back like a tightening net. He tries to sort out picking up his car and then his kid. Or should he pick up the kid first? He wants more to see the kid. It would be quicker to walk over to Mrs. Springer's. She lived closer. But suppose she was watching out the window for him to come so she could pop out and tell him how tired Janice looked. Who wouldn't be tired after tramping around trying to buy something with you, you miserable nickel-hugger? You fat hag? You old gypsy? If he had the kid along, this might not happen. Rabbit likes the idea of walking up from his mother's place with his boy. 2.5, Nelson walks like a trooper with choppy, stubborn steps. They'd walk along in the day's last light under the trees, and then like magic there would be Daddy's car at a curb. But it will take longer this way, what with his own mother talking slyly and roundabout about how incompetent Janice is. It ruined him when his mother went on like that. Maybe she did it just to kid him, but he couldn't take her lightly. She was somehow too powerful, at least with him. He had better go for the car first and pick the kid up with it. But he doesn't want to do it this way. He just doesn't. The problem knits in front of him, and he feels sickened by the intricacy. Janice calls from the kitchen, "And, honey, pick up a pack of cigarettes, could you?" in a normal voice that says everything is forgiven, everything is the same. Rabbit freezes, standing looking at his faint yellow shadow on the white door that leads to the hall, and senses he is in a trap. It seems certain. In disgust, he goes out. Outdoors it is growing dark and cool. The Norwegian maples exhale the smell of their sticky new buds, and the broad living room windows along Wilbur Street show beyond the silver patch of a television set the warm bulbs burning in kitchens, like fires at the backs of caves. He walks downhill. The day is gathering itself in. He now and then touches with his hand the rough bark of a tree or the dry twigs of a hedge to give himself the small answer of a texture. At the corner where Wilbur Street meets Potter Avenue, a mailbox stands, leaning in twilight on its concrete post. Tall, two-petaled street sign, the cleat-gouged trunk of the telephone pole holding its insulators against the sky, fire hydrant like a golden bush, a grove. He used to love to climb the poles, to shinny up from a friend's shoulders until the ladder of spikes came to your hands, to get up to where you could hear the wires sing. Terrifying, motionless whisper. It always tempted you to fall, to let the hard spikes in your palms go and feel the space on your back, feel it take your feet and ride up your spine as you fell. He remembers how hot your hands felt at the top, rubbed full of splinters from getting up to where the spikes began, listening to the wires as if you could hear what people were saying, what all that secret adult world was about. The insulator's giant blue eggs in a windy nest. As he walks along Potter Avenue, the wires at their silent height strike into and through the crowns of the breathing maples. At the next corner, where the water from the ice plant used to come down, sob into a drain, and reappear on the other side of the street, Rabbit crosses over and walks beside the gutter where the water used to run, coating the shallow side of its course with ribbons of green slime, waving and waiting to slip under your feet and dunk you if you dared walk on them. He can remember falling in, but not why he was walking along this slippery edge in the first place. Then he remembers. To impress the girls, Lottie Bingaman, Margaret Shellkopf, sometimes June Cobb and Mary Hoyer, he walked home from grade school with. Margaret's nose would often start bleeding for no reason. She had worn high-button shoes. He turns down Kegerais Street, a narrow gravel alley curving past the blank back side of a small box factory where mostly middle-aged women work, the cement block face of a wholesale beer outlet, and a truly old stone farmhouse, now boarded up, one of the oldest buildings in town, thick, crude masonry of Indian skin sandstone. This building, which once commanded half of the acreage the town is now built on, still retains, behind a shattered and vandalized fence, its yard, a junk heap of brown stalks and eroded timber that will in the summer bloom with an unwanted wealth of weeds, waxy green wands and milky pods of silk seeds, and airy yellowheads almost liquid with pollen. So there is some space between the old farmhouse and the Sunshine Athletic Association, a tall, thin brick building like a city tenement misplaced in this disordered alley of backsides and leftovers. The entrance is made ominous by a strange sheathing, the size of an outhouse, erected each winter on the stone steps to protect the bar from the weather. Rabbit has several times entered the club. There was no sunshine in it. The first floor was a bar, and the second was full of card tables, where the old bucks of the town sat muttering strategically. Alcohol and cards, Rabbit both associates with a depressing kind of sin with bad breath, and he was further depressed by the political air of the place. His old basketball coach, Marty Totherow, who before scandal had ousted him from the high school, had a certain grip on local affairs, lived in this building, supposedly, and still, they said, manipulated. Rabbit dislikes manipulation, but he had liked Totherow. Next to his mother, Totherow had had the most force. The thought of his old coach crouching in there frightens him. He walks on, past a body shop and an unused chicken house. His progress is always down, for the town of Mount Judge is built on the east side of the mountain Mount Judge, whose west face overlooks the city of Brewer. Though the town and the city meet along the highway that skirts the mountain on the south on the way to Philadelphia, 50 miles away, they will never merge, for between them the mountain lifts a broad green spine, 2 miles long north to south, assaulted by gravel pits and cemeteries and new developments, but above a line preserved hundreds of acres of forest Mount Judge boys can never wholly explore. Much of it is penetrated by the sound of cars climbing the scenic drives in second gear. But in long patches of forgotten pine plantation, the needle-hushed floor of land glides up and up, on and on, under endless tunnels of dead green, and you seem to have passed through silence into something worse. And then, coming upon a patch of sunlight the branches neglect to keep out, or upon a softened, stone-filled cellar pit dug by some brave and monstrous settler centuries ago, you become vividly frightened, as if this other sign of life will call attention to yourself, and the menace of the trees will become active. Your fear trills like an alarm bell you cannot shut off. The louder, the faster you run, hunchbacked until distinctly, with a gasp of the clutch, a near car shifts gears and the stumpy white posts of the guard fence dawn behind the pine trunks. Then, safe on the firm blacktop, you decide whether to walk back down home or to hike up to the Pinnacle Hotel for a candy bar and a view of Brewer spread out below like a carpet. A red city, where they paint wood, tin, even red bricks red. An orange-rose flower-pot red that is unlike the color of any other city in the world, yet to the children of the county is the only color of cities, the color all cities are. The mountain brings dusk early to the town. Now, just a few minutes after 6, a day before the vernal equinox, All the houses and gravel-roofed factories and diagonal hillside streets are in the shadow that washes deep into the valley of farmland east of the mountain. Huts on the shadow's shore, twin rows of ranch houses blare from their picture windows the reflection of the setting sun. One by one, as suddenly as lamps, these windows dim as the sunlight ebbs, drawing across the development and across the tan, fenced land waiting for planting, and a golf course that at the distance could be a long pasture except for the yellow beans of sand, drawing upward into the opposing hills on whose westward slopes it still burns with afternoon pride. Rabbit pauses at the end of the alley, where he has an open view. He used to caddy over there. Pricked by an indefinite urgency, he turns away, going left on Jackson Road, where he lived for 20 years. His parents' home is in a two-family brick house on the corner, but it is their neighbors, the Bolgers, who have the corner half, with a narrow side yard Mrs. Angstrom has always envied. The Bolgers' windows getting all that light, and here we sit wedged in. Rabbit stealthily approaches his old home on the grass, hopping the little barberry hedge and the wire meant to keep kids on the pavement. He sneaks down the strip of grass between the two cement walls that go with the two brick walls. He used to live behind the one and the Zims behind the other. All day long, Mrs. Zim, who was plain, with big thyroid eyes and bluish, slack skin, screamed at her daughter Carolyn, who was prettier than you'd think a 5-year-old girl could be. Mr. Zim was a thick-lipped redhead, and in Carolyn, thick and thin, red and blue, health and high-strungness had blended just right. Her beauty was not merely precocious, but somehow absolutely, apart from age, exotic. Even Harry, 6 years older, saw this. All day long, Mrs. Zim screamed at her, and when Mr. Zim came home from work, the two of them would shout together for hours. It would begin with Mr. defending the little girl, and then as the neighbors listened, old wounds opened like complicated flowers in the night. Sometimes Mom said that Mr. would murder Mrs. Sometimes she said that the little girl would murder them both as they lay asleep. It was true there was something cold-blooded about Carolyn. When she reached school age, she never left the house without a smile on her little heart face, swinging herself along like she owned the world, though the Angstroms had just heard her mother throw hysterics at her all through breakfast, the kitchen windows not 6 feet apart. How does that poor man endure? If Carolyn and her mother don't settle their differences, they're going to wake up some fair morning without a protector. But Mom was never proved right in any of her predictions. When the Zims left, it was together, Mr. and Mrs. and Carolyn, vanishing in a station wagon while half their furniture still stood on the sidewalk beside the mover's truck. He had a new job in Cleveland, Ohio. Poor souls, they won't be missed. But they were. They had sold their half-house to an old couple, strict Methodists, and the old man refused to cut the strip of grass between his house and the Angstroms. Mr. Zim, who worked outdoors rain or shine on weekends, as if it's his only pleasure in life, and I don't wonder, had always cut it. The old Methodist cut exactly his half, one swath of a lawnmower, and then pushed his lawnmower back inverted on his own walk, when it would have been just as easy to push it back along the other half of the strip and not leave such a ridiculous job. When I hear that old fool's wheels rattle along his walk so self-righteously, my blood pressure goes up, so I hear my ears pop. Mother refused to let him or his father mow their half for one whole summer, and the grass grew knee-high in that little sunless space, and stalks of like wheat came up, and 1 or 2 goldenrod, until a man from the town came around in August and said they must cut it on account of an ordinance. He was sorry. Harry had gone to the door and was saying, "Sure, okay," when Mother came up behind him saying, "What did he mean? That was her flower bed. She had no intention of letting it be destroyed." As her son, Rabbit felt terribly embarrassed. The man just looked at her and got a little thumbed book out of his hip pocket and showed her the ordinance. She still said it was her flower bed. The man read to her what the fine was and went off the porch. That Saturday, when she was in Brewer shopping, Pop got the sickle out of the garage and chopped all the weeds down, and Harry pushed the lawnmower back and forth across the stubble until it looked as trim as the Methodists' half, though browner. He felt guilty doing it and was frightened of the fight his parents would have when Mother came back. He dreaded their quarrels. When their faces went angry and flat and words flew, it was as if a pane of glass were put in front of him, cutting off air. His strength drained away, and he had to go to a far corner of the house. This time there was no fight. His father shocked him by simply lying, and doubled the shock by winking as he did it. He told her the Methodist had at last broken down and cut the strip of grass himself. Mother believed it, but wasn't pleased. She talked all the rest of the day and off and on all week about suing the old holy roller. In a way, she had come to think it was her flower bed. From cement to cement, the strip is not much more than a foot across. Walking along it feels slightly precarious to Harry, like treading the top of a wall. He walks back as far as the lit kitchen window, and steps onto the cement without the sole of his shoe scraping, and on tiptoe looks in one bright corner. He sees himself sitting in a high chair, and a quick, strange jealousy comes and passes. It is his son. The boy's little neck gleams like one more clean object in the kitchen among the cups and plates and chromium knobs and aluminum cake-making receptacles on shelves scalloped with glossy oilcloth. His mother's glasses glitter as she leans in from her place at the table with a spoon of smoking beans at the end of her fat, curved arm. Her face shows none of the worry she must be feeling about why nobody comes for the boy, and instead is narrowed, her nose a faceted beak, into one wish, that the boy eat. Her mouth is focused into white crinkles. They smooth in a smile. Nelson's lips, hidden from Rabbit's angle, must have taken the beans. The others around the table express praise, blurred syllables from his father, piercing from his sister, something thin about both voices. Rabbit, with the intervening glass and the rustle of blood in his head, can't hear what they say. His father, fresh from work, is in an ink-smeared blue shirt, and when his face lapses from applauding his grandson, looks old, tired, and grizzled. His throat a loose bundle of cords. The new teeth he got a year ago have changed his face, collapsed it a fraction of an inch. Miriam, dolled up in gold and jet for Friday night, picks at her food indifferently and offers a spoonful to the kid. The reach of her slender, white, braceleted arm across the steaming table rings a barbaric chord into the scene. She makes up too much. At 19, she would be good enough without green eyelids. Because she has buck teeth, she tries not to smile. Nelson's big, whorly head dips on its bright neck, and his foreshortened hand, dots of pink, dabbles toward the spoon, wants to take it from her. Pop's face lurches into laughter above his plate, and Mim's lips leap in a grin that cracks her cautious, wised-up squint and breaks through to the little girl Rabbit used to ride on his handlebars, her streaming hair tickling his eyes as they coasted down the steep Mount Judge streets. She lets Nelson take her spoon, and he drops it. The kid cries, "Peel, peel." This Rabbit can hear and understand. It means spill. Pop and Mim smile and make remarks. But Mom, mouth set, comes in neatly with her spoon. Harry's boy is being fed. This home is happier than his. He glides a pace backward over the cement and re-walks the silent strip of grass. His acts take on decisive haste. In darkness, he goes down another block of Jackson. He cuts up Joseph Street, runs a block, strides another, and comes within sight of his car, its grid grinning at him, parked the wrong way on this side of the street. He taps his pocket, and fear hits him. He doesn't have the key. Everything depends, the whole pure idea, on which way Janice was sloppy. Either she forgot to give him the key when he went out, or she never bothered to take it out of the ignition. He tries to imagine which is more likely, and can't. He doesn't know her that well. He never knows what the hell she'll do. She doesn't know herself. Dumb. The back, but not the front, of the big Springer house is lit up. He moves cautiously in the sweet-smelling shadows under the trees in case the old lady is waiting inside the darkened living room to tell him what she thinks. He crosses around in front of the car, the '55 Ford that old man Springer, with his little yellow Hitler mustache, sold him for an even $1,000 in 1957 because the scared bastard was ashamed. Cars being his business, he was ashamed of his daughter marrying somebody who had nothing but a '36 Buick he bought for $125 in the Army in Texas in 1953. Made him cough up $1,000 he didn't have when the Buick had just had $80 worth of work. That was the kind of thing. They deserve everything they get. He opens the car from the passenger side, wincing at the pung of the brittle door spring, and quickly ducking his head into the car. Thank God. Beneath the knobs for lights and wipers, the octagon of the ignition key tells in silhouette. Bless that dope. Rabbit slithers in, closing the side door until metal touches metal, but not slamming it. The front of the stucco Springer house is still unlit. It reminds him for some reason of an abandoned ice cream stand. He turns the key through on into start, and the motor churns and catches. In his anxiety to be secret, he is delicate on the accelerator, and the motor, idle for hours in the air of an early spring day, is cold, sticks, and stalls. Rabbit's heart rises, and a taste of straw comes into his throat. But, of course, what the hell if she does come out? The only thing suspicious is that he doesn't have the kid, and he can say he's on his way to pick him up. That would have been the logical way to do it anyway. Nevertheless, he doesn't want to be put to the inconvenience of lying, however plausibly. He pulls the hand choke out a fraction, just enough to pinch his fingertips, and starts the motor again. He pumps once, and glances aside to see the Springer's living room light flash on, and lets the clutch out, and the Ford bucks away from the curb. He drives too fast down Joseph Street, and turns left, ignoring the sign saying stop. He heads down Jackson to where it runs obliquely into Central, which is also 422 to Philadelphia. Stop. He doesn't want to go to Philadelphia, but the road broadens on the edge of town, beyond the electric power station, and the only other choice is to go back through Mount Judge, around the mountain into the thick of Brewer, and the supper-time traffic. He doesn't intend ever to see Brewer again, that flower-pot city. The highway turns from 3-lane to 4-lane, and there is no danger of hitting another car. They all run along together like sticks on a stream. Rabbit turns on the radio. After a hum, a beautiful negress sings, "Without a song, the day would never end. Without a song." Rabbit wishes for a cigarette to go with the washed feeling inside, and remembers he gave up smoking and feels cleaner still. He slumps down and puts one arm up on the back of the seat and glides down the twilight pike left-handed. A field of corn, the negress's voice, bending dark and warm like the inside of a cello. The grasses grow, the countryside dipping around the road like a continuous dark bird. It makes no mind, no how. His scalp contracts ecstatically. Without a... The smell of parched rubber says the heater has come on, and he turns the little lever to Maud. Secret Love, Autumn Leaves, and something whose title he missed. Supper music, music to cook by. His mind nervously shifts away from the involuntary vision of Janice's meal sizzling in the pan, chops probably, the grease-tinted water bubbling disconsolately, the unfrozen peas steaming away their vitamins. He tries to think of something pleasant. He imagines himself about to shoot a long one-hander, but he feels he's on a cliff. There is an abyss he will fall into when the ball leaves his hands. He tries to repicture his mother and sister feeding his son, but the boy is crying in backward vision, his forehead red and his mouth stretched wide and his helpless breath hot. There must be something. The water from the ice plant running in the gutter, yellowish, the way it curled on stones and ran in diagonal wrinkles, waving the pretty threads of slime attached to its edges. Suddenly, Janice shivers in memory on the other girl's bed in declining daylight. He tries to blot out the sensation with Miriam, Mim on his handlebars. Mim on a sled in dark snowfall being pulled up Jackson Street by him, the little kid laughing in her hood, himself the big brother, the red lights in snowfall marking the trestles the town crew have used to block off the street for sledding. Down, down, the runners whistling on the dark, packed slick. Hold me, Harry! The sparks as the runners hit the cinders spread at the bottom for safety. The scraping stop like the thump of a great heart in the dark. Once more, Harry, then we'll go home. I promise, Harry. Please? Oh, I love you. Little Mim, only 7 or so, in her dark hood, the street waxy with snow still falling. Poor Janice would probably have the wind up now, on the phone to her mother or his mother, somebody, wondering why her supper was getting cold. So dumb. Forgive me. He accelerates. The growing complexity of lights threatens him. He is being drawn into Philadelphia. He hates Philadelphia. Dirtiest city in the world, they live on poisoned water. He wants to go south, down the map into orange groves and smoking rivers and barefoot women. It seems simple enough. Drive all night, through the dawn, through the morning, through the noon, park on a beach, take off your shoes, and fall asleep by the Gulf of Mexico. Wake up with the stars above, perfectly spaced in perfect health. But he is going east, the worst direction, into unhealth, soot, and stink. A smothering hole where you can't move without killing somebody. Yet the highway sucks him on, and a sign says Pottstown, too. He almost breaks, but then he thinks. If he's heading east, south is on his right. And then, as if the world were just standing around waiting to serve his thoughts, a broad road to the right is advertised. Route 100, West Chester, Wilmington. Route 100 has a fine ultimate sound. He doesn't want to go to Wilmington, but it's the right direction. He's never been to Wilmington. The DuPonts own it. He wonders what it's like to make it to a DuPont. He doesn't drive 5 miles before this road begins to feel like a part of the same trap. The first road offered him, he turns right on. A keystone marker in the headlights says 23, a good number. The first varsity game he played in, he made 23 points. A sophomore and a virgin. Trees overshadow this narrower road. A barefoot DuPont, brown legs probably, bitty, birdy breasts, beside a swimming pool in France. Something like money in a naked woman, deep millions. You think of millions as being white. Sink all the way in softly, still lots left. Rich girls frigid? Nymphomaniacs? Must vary. Just women, after all, descended from some old Indian cheater, luckier than the rest, inherit the same stuff if they lived in a slum, glow all the whiter there on drab mattresses, that wonderful softness they have when they want it, otherwise just fat weight, that wonderful softness. But they want you up and hard on their little ledge. The thing is, play them until just a touch. You can tell. Their skin under the fur gets all loose like a puppy's neck. Route 23 works west through little tame country towns, Coventryville, Elverson, Morgantown. Rabbit likes these. Square high farmhouses nuzzle the road, soft chalk sides. In one town a tavern blazes, and he stops at a hardware store opposite with 2 gasoline pumps outside. He knows from the radio it's about 7:30, but the hardware store is still open. Shovels and cedars and post-hole diggers and axes, metal painted blue and orange and yellow in the window, along with some fishing rods and a string of fielder's gloves. A middle-aged man comes out in boots, baggy suntans, and 2 shirts. "Yes, sir," he says, coming down on the second word with forced weight, like a lame man stepping. "Could you fill it up with regular?" The man starts to pump it in, and Rabbit gets out of the car and goes around to the back and asks, "How far am I from Brewer?" The farmer looks up with a look of curt distrust from listening to the gas gurgle. He lifts a finger. "Back up and take that road, and it's 16 miles to the bridge." 16. He had driven 40 miles to get 16 miles away. But it was far enough. This was another world. It smells differently, smells older, of nooks and pockets in the ground that nobody's stirred yet. Suppose I go straight. That'll take you to Churchtown. What's after Churchtown? New Holland? Lancaster? Do you have any maps? Son, where do you want to go? Huh? I don't know exactly. Where are you headed? The man is patient. His face at the same time seems fatherly and crafty and stupid. For the first time, Harry realizes he is a criminal. He hears the gasoline rise in the neck of the tank and notices with what care the farmer squeezes every drop he can into the tank without letting it slosh over the lip insolently, the way a city garageman would. Out here, a drop of gas isn't supposed to escape, and he's in the middle of it at night. Laws aren't ghosts in this country. They walk around with the smell of earth on them. Senseless fear cakes over Rabbit's body. Check the oil? The man asks in a voice of startling softness after hanging up the hose on the side of the rusty pump, one of the old style with the painted bubble head. No. Wait. Yeah, you better had. Thanks. Simmer down. All he'd done was ask for a map. Damn dirt digger so stingy. What was suspicious about that? Somebody was always going somewhere. He better get the oil checked because he wasn't going to stop again until he was halfway to Georgia. Hey, how far is Lancaster south of here? Due south? Don't know. It's about 25 miles on the road. Your oil's all right. You think you're going to Lancaster now? Yeah, I might. Check your water? No, it's okay. Batteries? They're fine. Let's go. The man lets the hood slam down and smiles over at Harry. That's $3.90 on the gas, young fella. The words are pronounced in that same heavy, cautious, crippled way. Rabbit puts 4 ones in his paw. He disappears into the hardware store. Maybe he's phoning the state cops. He acts like he knows something, but how could he? Rabbit itches to duck into the car and drive off. To steady himself, he counts the money left in his wallet. 73. Today was payday. Fingering so much lettuce strengthens his nerves. Switching off the lights in the hardware store as he comes, the farmer comes back with the dime and no map. Harry cups his hand for the dime, and the man pushes it in with his broad thumb and says, "Looked around inside, and the only road map is New York State. You don't want to go that way, do you now?" "No," Rabbit answers, and walks to his car door. He feels through the hairs on the back of his neck, the man following him. He gets into the car and slams the door, and the farmer is right there, the meat of his face hung in the open door window. He bends down and nearly sticks his face in. His cracked, thin lips with a scar tilting toward his nose move thoughtfully. He's wearing glasses, a scholar. The only way to get somewhere, you know, is to figure out where you're going before you go there. Rabbit catches a whiff of whiskey. He says in a level way, "I don't think so." The lips and spectacles and black hairs poking out of the man's tear-shaped nostrils show no surprise. Rabbit pulls out, going straight. Everybody who tells you how to act has whiskey on their breath. He drives to Lancaster, and all the way his good, airy feeling inside is spoiled. That guy didn't know a thing but was just half-crocked makes the whole region sinister. Outside of Churchtown, he passes an Amish buggy in the dark and catches a glimpse of a bearded man and a woman in black in this horse-drawn shadow, glaring like devils. The beard inside the buggy like hairs in a nostril. He tries to think of the good life these people lead, of the way they keep clear of all this phony business, this 20th century vitamin racket. But in his head, they stay devils, risking getting killed, trotting along with one dim pink reflector behind, hating Rabbit and his kind, with their big furry tail lights. Who they think they were? He can't shake them, mentally. They never appeared in his rearview mirror. He passed them, and there was nothing. It was just that one sideways glance, the woman's face a hatchet of smoke in the square shadow. Tall coffin lined with hair clopping along to the tune of a dying horse. Amish overworked their animals, he knew. Fanatics, hump their women standing up out in the fields, wearing clothes. Just hoist black skirts and there it was, nothing underneath. No underpants. Fanatics. Worship manure. The rich earth seems to cast its darkness upward into the air. The farm country is somber at night. He is grateful when the lights of Lancaster merge with his dim beams. He stops at a diner whose clock says 8:04. He hadn't intended to eat until he got out of the state. He takes a map from the rack by the door and, while eating 3 hamburgers at the counter, studies his position. He is in Lancaster, surrounded by funny names. Bird in Hand, Paradise, Intercourse, Mount Airy, Mascot. They probably didn't seem funny if you lived in them, like Mount Judge. You get used. A town has to be called something. Bird in Hand, Paradise. His eyes kept going back to this dainty lettering on the map. He has an impulse, amid the oil-filmed shimmer of this synthetic and desultory diner, to drive there. Little plump women, toy dogs in the street, candy houses in lemon sunshine. But no, his goal is the huge white sun of the south, and from the map he's been traveling more west than south. If the dirt digger back there had had a map, he could have gone due south on 10. Now the only thing to do is to go into the heart of Lancaster and take 222 out and take it all the way down into Maryland and then catch 1. He remembers reading in the Saturday Evening Post how 1 goes from Florida to Maine through the most beautiful scenery in the world. He asks for a glass of milk and to go with it a piece of apple pie. The crust is crisp and bubbled, but the filling is watery and lavender in color. He pays by cracking a 10 and goes out into the parking lot feeling pleased. The hamburgers had been fatter and warmer than the ones you get in Brewer, and the buns had seemed steamed. It takes him a half hour to pick his way through the city. On 222, he drives south through Refton, Hessdale, New Providence, and Quarryville, through Mechanics Grove and Unicorn, and then a long stretch so dull and unmarked he doesn't know he's entered Maryland until he hits Oakwood. On the radio he hears No Other Arms, No Other Lips, Stagger Lee, a commercial for Rayco clear plastic seat covers, If I Didn't Care by Connie Francis, a commercial for radio-controlled garage door operators, I Ran All the Way Home Just to Say I'm Sorry, That Old Feeling by Mel Torme, a commercial for a big-screen Westinghouse TV set with one-finger automatic tuning, needle-sharp pictures, a nose away from the screen. The Italian Cowboy Song, Yep by Dwayne Eddy, a commercial for Papermate pens, Almost Grown, a commercial for Tame Cream Rinse, Let's Stroll, News. President Eisenhower and Prime Minister Harold Macmillan began a series of talks in Gettysburg. Tibetans battle Chinese communists in Lhasa. The whereabouts of the Dalai Lama, spiritual ruler of this remote and backward land, are unknown. A $250,000 trust fund has been left to a Park Avenue maid. Spring scheduled to arrive tomorrow. Sports news. Yanks over Braves in Miami. Somebody tied with somebody in St. Petersburg Open. Scores in a local basketball tournament. Weather. Fair and seasonably warm. The Happy Organ. Turn Me Loose. A commercial for Savings Bank Life Insurance. Roxville, PA. Rabbit loves it. A picture no artist could paint. A commercial for new formula Barbasol Presto Lather. The daily cleansing action tends to prevent skin blemishes and emulsifies something. Pink Shoelaces by Dodie Stevens. A letter about a little boy called Billy Tessman who was hit by a car and would appreciate cards or letters. Petite Fleur. Fungo. Great. A commercial for Wooltex all-wool suits. Fallout by Henry Mancini. Everybody likes to cha-cha-cha. A commercial for Lord's Grace table napkins and the gorgeous Last Supper tablecloth. The Beat of My Heart. A commercial for Speed Shine Wax and Lanolin Clay. Venus. And then the same news again. Where is the Dalai Lama? Shortly after Oakwood, he comes to Route 1. which, with its hot dog stands and calso signs and roadside taverns aping log cabins, is unexpectedly discouraging. The further he drives, the more he feels some great confused system, Baltimore now instead of Philadelphia, reaching for him. He stops at a gas station for $2 worth of regular. What he really wants is another map. He unfolds it, standing by a Coke machine, and reads it in the light coming through a window stained green by stacked cans of liquid wax. His problem is to get west and free of Baltimore, Washington, which like a two-headed dog guards the coastal route to the south. He doesn't want to go down along the water anyway. His image is of himself going right down the middle, right into the broad, soft belly of the land, surprising the dawn cotton fields with his northern plates. Now he is somewhere here. Further on, then, a road numbered 23 will go off to his left. No, his right. That goes up and over and back into Pennsylvania, but at this place, Shawsville, he can take a little narrow blue road without a number. Then go down a little and over again on 137. There is a ragged curve, then, that this road makes with 482, and then 31. Rabbit can feel himself swinging up and through that curve into the red line numbered 26, and down that into another numbered 340. Red, too. He is really gliding and suddenly sees where he wants to go. Over on the left, 3 red roads stream parallel northeast to southwest. Rabbit can just feel them sliding down through the valleys of the Appalachians. Get on one of them, it would be a chute, dumping you into sweet, low cottonland in the morning. Yes, once he gets on that, he can shake all thoughts of the mess behind him. He gives $2 for gas to the attendant, a young but tall colored boy whose limber, lazy body slumping inside his baggy Amico coveralls, Rabbit has a weird impulse to hug. This far south, the air already feels warmer. Warmth vibrates in brown and purple arcs between the lights of the service station and the moon. The clock in the window above the green cans of liquid wax says 9:10. The thin red second hand sweeps the numbers calmly and makes Rabbit's way seem smooth. He ducks into the Ford and in that fusty, hot interior starts to murmur, "Everybody loves the cha-cha-cha." He drives bravely at first, over blacktop and whitetop, through towns and fields, past false intersections with siren voices, keeping the map on the seat beside him, keeping the numbers straight and resisting the impulse to turn blindly south. Something animal in him knows he is going west. The land grows wilder. The road evades great lakes and tunnels through pines. In the top of the windshield, the telephone wires continually whip the stars. The music on the radio slowly freezes. The rock and roll for kids cools into old standards and show tunes and comforting songs from the 40s. Rabbit pictures married couples driving home to babysitters after a meal out and a movie. Then these melodies turn to ice as real night music takes over. Pianos and vibes erecting clusters in the high, brittle octaves, and a clarinet wandering across like a crack on a pond. Sax is doing the same figure 8 over and over again. He drives through Westminster. It takes forever to reach Frederick. He picks up 340 and crosses the Potomac. Growing sleepy, Rabbit stops before midnight at a roadside cafe for coffee. Somehow, though he can't put his finger on the difference, he is unlike the other customers. They sense it, too, and look at him with hard eyes. Eyes like little metal studs pinned into the white faces of young men sitting in zippered jackets in booths, 3 to a girl, the girls with orange hair hanging like seaweed or loosely bound with gold barrettes like pirate treasure. At the counter, middle-aged couples in overcoats bunch their faces forward into the straws of gray ice cream sodas. In the hush his entrance induces, the excessive courtesy the weary woman behind the counter shows him amplifies his strangeness. He orders coffee quietly and studies the rim of the cup to steady the sliding in his stomach. He had thought, he had read, that from shore to shore all America was the same. He wonders, Is it just these people I'm outside, or is it all America? Outside, in the sharp air, he flinches when footsteps pound behind him, but it is just two lovers, holding hands and in a hurry to reach their car, their locked hands a starfish leaping through the dark. Their license plate says West Virginia. All the plates do, except his. On the other side of the road, the wooded land dips down so he can look over the tops of trees at the side of a mountain, like a cutout of stiff paper mounted on a slightly faded blue sheet. He climbs into his Ford distastefully, but its stale air is his only haven. He drives through a thickening night. The road unravels with infuriating slowness, its black wall wearilessly rising in front of his headlights no matter how they twist. The tar sucks his tires. He realizes that the heat on his cheeks is anger. He has been angry ever since he left that diner full of mermaids. So angry his cheeks feel parched inside his mouth and his nostrils water. He grinds his foot down as if to squash this snake of a road and nearly loses the car on a curve as the two right wheels fall captive to the dirt shoulder. He brings them back, but keeps the speedometer needle leaning to the right. He turns off the radio. Its music no longer seems a river he is riding down, but instead speaks with the voice of the cities and brushes his head with slippery hands. Yet into the silence that results, he refuses to let thoughts come. He doesn't want to think. He wants to fall asleep and wake up pillowed by sand. How stupid, how frigging stupid it was not to be further than this. At midnight, the night half gone. The land refuses to change. The more he drives, the more the region resembles the country around Mount Judge. The same scruff on the embankments, the same weathered billboards for the same insane products. At the upper edge of his headlight beams, the naked tree twigs make the same net. Indeed, the net seems thicker now. The animal in him swells its protest that he is going west. His mind stubbornly resists. The only way to get somewhere is to decide where you're going and go. His plan calls for him to bear left 28 miles after Frederick, and that 28 miles is used up now, and though his instincts cry out against it, when a broad road leads off to the left, though it's unmarked, he takes it. It is unlikely that the road would be marked from its thickness on the map, but it is a shortcut, he knows. He remembers that when Marty Totherow began to coach him, he didn't want to shoot fouls underhand, but that it turned out in the end to be the way. The road is broad and confident for miles, but there is a sudden patched stretch, and after that it climbs and narrows. Narrows not so much by plan as naturally, the edges crumbling in and the woods on either side crowding down. The road twists more and more wildly in its struggle to gain height, and then, without warning, sheds its skin of asphalt and worms on in the dirt. By now, Rabbit knows this is not the road, but he is afraid to stop the car to turn it around. He has left the last light of a house miles behind. When he strays from straddling the mane of weeds, brambles rake his painted sides. Tree trunks and low limbs are all his headlights pick up. The scrabbling shadows spider backward through the web of wilderness into a black core where he fears his probe of light will stir some beast or ghost. He supports speed with prayer, praying that the road not stop, remembering how on Mount Judge even the shaggiest, most forgotten logging lane eventually sloped to the valley. His ears itch, his height presses on them. The prayer's answer is blinding. The trees at a far bend leap like flame, and a car comes around and flies at him with its beams tilted high. Rabbit slithers over into the ditch, and faceless as death, the bright car rips by at a speed twice his own. For more than a minute, Rabbit drives through this bastard's insulting dust, yet the good news makes him meek, the news that this road goes two ways, and shortly he seems to be in a park. His lights pick up green little barrels stenciled, "Please," and the trees are thinned on both sides, and in among them picnic tables and pavilions and outhouses show their straight edges. The curves of cars show too, and a few are parked close to the road, their passengers down out of sight. So the road of horrors is a lover's lane. In 100 yards it ends. It meets at right angles a smooth, broad highway overhung by the dark cloud of a mountain ridge. One car zips north, another zips south. There are no signs. Rabbit puts the shift in neutral and pulls out the emergency brake and turns on the roof light and studies his map. His hands and shins are trembling. His brain flutters with fatigue behind sandy eyelids. The time must be 12:30 or later. The highway in front of him is empty. He has forgotten the numbers of the routes he has taken and the names of the towns he has passed through. He remembers Frederick, but can't find it, and in time realizes he is searching in a section due west of Washington where he has never been. There are so many red lines and blue lines, long names, little towns, squares and circles and stars. He moves his eyes north, but the only line he recognizes is the straight dotted line of the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, the Mason-Dixon line. The schoolroom in which he learned this recurs to him. The rooted desk rows, the scarred varnish, the milky black of the blackboard, the sweet pieces of ass all up and down the aisles in alphabetical order. His eyes blankly flounder. Rabbit hears a clock in his head beat, monstrously slow, the soft ticks as far apart as the sound of waves on the shore he had wanted to reach. He burns his attention through the film fogging his eyes down into the map again. At once, Frederick pops into sight, but in trying to steady its position, he loses it, and fury makes the bridge of his nose ache. The names melt away, and he sees the map whole, a net, all those red lines and blue lines and stars, a net he is somewhere caught in. He claws at it and tears it. With a gasp of exasperation, he rips away a great triangular piece and tears the large remnant in half, and more calmly lays these 3 pieces on top of each other and tears them in half, and then those 6 pieces, and so on, until he has a wad he can squeeze in his hand like a ball. He rolls down the window and throws the ball out. It explodes, and the bent scraps, like disembodied wings, flicker back over the top of the car. He cranks up the window. He blames everything on that farmer with glasses and 2 shirts. Funny how the man sticks in his throat. He can't think past him, his smugness, his solidity, somehow. He stumbled over him back there and is stumbling still. Can't get him away from his feet, like shoelaces too long or a stiff stick between his feet. The man mocked, whether out of his mouth or in the placed motions of his hands, or through his hairy ears, somewhere out of his body mocked the furtive, wordless hopes that at moments made the ground firm for Harry. Decide where you want to go and then go. It missed the whole point, and yet there is always the chance that, little as it is everything. At any rate, Rabbit feels if he'd trusted to instinct, he'd be in South Carolina now. He wishes he had a cigarette to help him decide what his instinct is. He decides to go to sleep in the car for a few hours. But a car starts up in the petting grove behind him, and the headlights wheel around and press on Rabbit's neck. He stopped his car right in the middle of the road for a glance at the map. Now he must move. He feels unreasoning fear of being overtaken. The other headlights swell in the rear-view mirror and fill it like a cup. He stamps the clutch, puts the shift in first, and releases the handbrake. Hopping onto the highway, he turns instinctively right, north. The trip home is easier. Though he has no map and hardly any gas, an all-night mobile gas magically appears near Hagerstown, and green signs begin to point to the Pennsylvania Turnpike. The music on the radio is soothing now, lyrical and unadvertised, and coming first from Harrisburg and then from Philadelphia, makes a beam he infallibly flies in on. He has broken through the barrier of fatigue and come into a calm, flat world where nothing matters much. The last quarter of a basketball game used to carry him into this world. You ran not as the crowd thought for the sake of the score, but for yourself, in a kind of idleness. There was you, and sometimes the ball, and then the hole, the high, perfect hole with its pretty skirt of net. It was you, just you and that fringed ring, and sometimes it came down right to your lips, it seemed, and sometimes it stayed away, hard and remote and small. It seemed silly for the crowd to applaud or groan over what you had already felt in your fingers, or even in your arms as you braced to shoot, or for that matter, in your eyes. When he was hot, he could see the separate threads wound into the strings looping the hoop. Yet at the start of the night, when you came out for warm-up and could see all the town clunkers sitting in the back of bleachers, elbowing each other, and the cheerleaders wisecracking with the racier male teachers, the crowd then seemed right inside you, your liver and lungs and stomach. There was one fat guy used to come who'd get on the floor of Rabbit's stomach and really make it shake. "Hey, gunner! Hey, showboat! Shoot! Shoot!" Rabbit remembers him fondly now. To that guy, he had been a hero of sorts. Throughout the early morning, the music keeps coming, and the signs keep pointing. His brain feels like a frail but alert invalid, packed inside among a lot of deep pillows, with messengers bringing down long corridors all this music and geographical news. At the same time, he feels abnormally sensitive on the surface, as if his skin is thinking. The steering wheel is thin as a whip in his hands. As he turns it lightly, he can feel the shaft stiffly pivot, and the differential gears part, and the bearings rotate in their sealed tunnels of grease. The phosphorescent winkers at the side of the road beguile him into thinking of young DuPont women, strings of them winding through huge glassy parties, potentially naked in their sequined sheath gowns.